Now that we've seen what the form is intended to do and examined its structure, let's get to work on the script to process the user input. I've opened process.php in the chapter 6, 06_02 begin folder of the exercise files. At the beginning of the file, I've created two arrays. The expected array contains the names of the fields that will be submitted by the form, and the required array contains the names of the required fields. We don't need to include photo in either of these lists because it will be submitted through the files superglobal array rather than the post array. These two arrays make it easy to handle the post array, processing only those values that are expected and making sure that required fields have a value. And at the same time as checking the required fields, I'm going to assign the values to simplified variables. So let's check the post array. So we need a for each loop. And as we go through the post array, we need to check both the key and the value. Now I only want to deal with those that are in the expected array, so we'll have a conditional statement if in array, and then we look for the key. If that's in the expected array, then we'll deal with it. Otherwise, we'll leave it out completely. And I also want to remove any leading and trailing white space from values, but you can't do that with an array, so we need to check first whether the value is an array. So if not is array value, we'll reassign to value the trimmed version. So now we've got the trimmed versions, we need to check the value and to see if the key is in the required array. So if empty value and in array, we're looking for the key. If that's in the required array, we need to deal with it. We need to add it to the missing array. But we also need to create a simplified variable and set it to an empty string. Simplified variable, we use $, and key. This is a variable. We set that to an empty string. So if the key is email, this will create a new variable called email and set it to an empty string. And then we need to add to the missing array the name of the key. But if it's not in the required array, in the else block, we'll simply assign to our variable key the value. So that checks missing required fields. It also assigns the values of the post array to simplified variables based on the key of each element that has been submitted. So let's test that by saving it, then going to register.php and loading it into a browser. And let's just submit the form without filling in any of the fields. And we've got all of those error messages. But down here we don't have an error message. And the reason for that is because checkboxes aren't included in the post array if they're not selected. So we need to amend the script in process.php. Let's go back to the editing program and process.php. We need to do it before going through the post array. So add in a couple of extra lines up there. And then if not is set, and we're looking for post accept terms. If that hasn't been set, we're going to set it to an empty string. So let's just save that, go back to the browser. This time let's just fill in one of the fields. I'll fill in my name and submit the form. It's remembered my name. We've got these other error messages, and if we scroll down, we've now got this error message, you must check this box. But if I do check the box and then submit the form, remembered my name again, and it's now remembered that this has been checked, so that error message has gone away. There's one other thing that we need to check, that's the email address that's being submitted through the form. So let's go back to the editing program and we need to check the email address after we've gone through the post array. So let's add in some extra space there, and we're checking email. First thing we need to do is to make sure that it's not in the missing array. So if not in array, and what we're looking for is email, and we're checking whether it's in the missing array. Now the reason I've been able to use email here like that rather than post email is because of this variable that we're using up here. To check whether the email address is in a valid format, we could use the Swift validate email static method, but we're not including a Swift mailer at the moment yet, so I'm going to use a PHP filter function instead. So email equals filter input, and we're expecting it from the post array, so we need input post. That's a constant, all in uppercase. Then the name is the email, and then the validation argument that we want is filter validate email. This is a PHP constant, so it's all in uppercase. If the email is in a valid format, it will return the value of the email and store it as email. But if it's not valid, it will return false. So we can now have a conditional statement there. If not email, we then set the value of errors email. We set that to please use a valid email address. So if we save that again and go back to the browser, and let's find the email field. There it is. Just put David in there and try to submit that. Because I'm using a modern browser, it says please include an @ in the email address. Okay, there's an @ Try it again. Please enter a part following @ David @ is incomplete. Okay, just an E there. I don't think that's very complete myself, but let's see how the browser treats that. Click register, and the browser has accepted it. But my server-side validation has said, oi, hang on a moment, please use a valid email address. And I think that that demonstrates the value of using server-side validation and not relying all the time on what browsers do. So that deals with the main options in the form. The photo needs special treatment, but before doing that, let's start building the message.